Stop before you send that message, before you call one more time, before you spend another night trying to figure out what you did wrong. I need you to hear something nobody around you is saying right now. 3 days ago, I watched someone type and delete the same message 9 times. 9 times. They wrote it, they read it, they deleted it. They started again. They were not crazy. They were not weak. They were doing exactly what every person does when they feel someone slipping away. They were trying harder and harder. And that is the problem. Because here is what nobody tells you. The more you reach, the further they step back. The more you explain, the less they listen. The more you prove your worth, the less they believe it. Not because you are not enough, but because of a principle Machiavelli identified 5 centuries ago that governs every human relationship, every power dynamic, every single interaction between people who want something from each other. Availability destroys value, always. You are not losing them because you are not good enough. You are losing ground because you have been showing up too much, too often, too openly. And the moment you understand why that happens, what is really driving it, and what to do instead, something inside you shifts permanently. Most people spend years inside this loop. They try harder, they give more, they become more patient, more understanding, more available. And the more they give, the more invisible they become. It is not random. It is not bad luck. It is psychology operating exactly as designed. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I am going to show you exactly what that one thing is. 7 parts, 7 truths, each one sharper than the last. But I promise you, it is not what you think. Before we go any further, drop this in the comments right now. Type, "I am done proving my worth." Let me see who is ready for this. Because this video is not for everyone. It is only for the ones who are finally ready to stop. 1. The person who is always there loses. Let me ask you something. Think about the people you have wanted most in your life, the ones you could not stop thinking about. Were they the ones who were always available? Or were they the ones you were never quite sure about? You already know the answer. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people refuse to accept. He wrote that the ruler who appears too frequently becomes ordinary, but the one who appears selectively becomes something else entirely. He becomes significant. He becomes anticipated. He becomes powerful. This is not just politics. This is psychology. This is you. The human brain has a mechanism called hedonic adaptation. It sounds complicated. It is not. It simply means this. Your brain stops paying attention to anything that becomes constant. Anything that is always there gets filed under guaranteed. And guaranteed things become invisible. You do not marvel at electricity every morning. You do not feel gratitude for the floor beneath your feet. They are always there, so your brain stopped processing them. And here is the tragedy that nobody wants to say out loud. Good people, loyal people, loving people, they become invisible to the exact people they care most about, not because they did anything wrong, but because they never left. Think about a candle in a dark room. Every eye goes to it. Every person notices it. But put that same candle in a fully lit room under fluorescent lights, surrounded by screens and lamps and brightness, and nobody sees it anymore. The candle did not change. The environment changed. The availability changed. You have been the candle in the wrong room. Now here is the part that will make some people uncomfortable. Every time you respond immediately, every time you rearrange your plans, every time you drop everything the moment they reach out, you are sending a signal. And the signal is not love. The signal is not loyalty. The signal is, I have nothing more important than you. And people, no matter how much they care about you, will eventually stop appreciating what they do not have to earn. Machiavelli was ruthless about this. He observed that men do not value what comes without effort. The prince who gives too freely is respected less than the prince who gives strategically. Generosity without scarcity is not generosity. It is expectation. You have trained them to expect you. And I do not say that to blame you. I say it because understanding this is the beginning of changing it. You were taught that love means always showing up, always being there, always proving it. And that teaching is destroying you. Because here is what constant availability actually communicates at the deepest level of human psychology. It communicates fear, not love. Fear. The fear of losing someone, the fear of not being enough, the fear of silence. And fear does not attract. Fear repels. This is the first thing you have to understand. Being always available is not a sign of strength. It is a signal of desperation, even when it comes from a genuine place. Even when your intentions are good, the impact is the same. People do not chase what is guaranteed. They chase what they are not sure of. Now I want to be clear about something before you misread this. I am not telling you to play games. I am not telling you to manufacture distance or pretend to be busy when you are not. That is manipulation. And manipulation requires you to keep your focus entirely on them, which puts them back at the center of your universe. The exact opposite of what needs to happen. What I am telling you is something far more powerful and far more honest. You have been operating from a place of fear for so long that it has started to feel like love. The fear of silence, the fear of their withdrawal, the fear of what happens if you stop reaching. But fear dressed in the language of devotion is still fear, and they feel it, even when they cannot name it. And here is what that question is, the one you have probably never asked yourself honestly. What would your life look like if you redirected all the energy you spend on them back into yourself? That question is not rhetorical. Sit with it, because the answer to that question is exactly where your power lives, and where this whole thing begins to turn. 2. Disappearing is not a tactic, it is a test. Here is where most people get it completely wrong. They hear the idea of pulling back, and they turn it into a performance. They go quiet for 3 days. They check to see if the other person noticed. They wait for a reaction. And then, the moment there is a small sign of response, they come flooding back with the same energy, the same pattern, the same neediness, wrapped in a new wrapper. And nothing changes. 6 months later, they are in the same place asking the same question. Why does this keep happening to me? I will tell you why. Because going quiet is not the strategy. It is what happens inside you while you are quiet that matters. If you are silent on the outside, but screaming on the inside, waiting and counting the hours, they feel it. People are not stupid. They sense the difference between someone who has genuinely moved on and someone who is performing distance while desperately hoping for a callback. One creates attraction, the other creates pity. So let me tell you what real disappearance actually is. It is not strategic withdrawal designed to trigger a reaction. Real disappearance is when you become so genuinely invested in your own life that you simply have less time and less mental space for someone who is not showing up for you. It is not a chess move. It is a consequence of self-respect. And here is the truth that will sting. When you disappear for real, one of two things happens, and both of them are exactly what you need. The person who genuinely cares about you will feel your absence like a shift in temperature, not because you are playing games, but because something real changed. They will reach out, they will ask what happened, they will reflect. That reflection is where actual change becomes possible. And the person who does not care, they will feel relief. And you need to know that. You need to know that some people in your life breathe easier when you pull back, because your constant reaching was the only thing maintaining a connection that had already ended on their side. That is not a failure. That is information. Machiavelli wrote that the wisest move is often the one that reveals the truth without forcing a confrontation. Your absence does exactly that. It removes the noise. It strips away the effort you were providing that masked the reality underneath. And what remains is the truth of how much or how little you actually mean to them. You cannot manufacture love through presence. You can only reveal whether it exists through absence. Now here is something even more important than all of this. What you do while you are gone matters more than the fact that you left. Go back to yourself. Literally. What did you stop doing when this relationship started consuming your focus? What interests did you quietly let go of? What ambitions did you put on hold? What friendships faded because you were always mentally somewhere else? What version of yourself did you slowly start editing out because it did not fit the space you were trying to occupy in their life? Those things. Go back to them, not as a strategy to seem more attractive, but because you lost yourself, piece by piece, quietly, and you need to find that person again. The person you were before you started shrinking to fit into the space someone else decided you deserved. Machiavelli understood the power of a leader who does not need the crowd. The moment a ruler becomes dependent on the crowd's approval, the crowd senses it, and they use it. But the leader who is genuinely indifferent to the crowd's noise, who has a vision and a direction that exists entirely independent of public reaction, that leader commands something the approval-seeking ruler never can. He commands respect, not because he demands it, but because he does not need it. That is who you are rebuilding right now. Not a strategy, not a version of yourself designed to trigger a specific reaction. A real person with a real life, with real momentum that moves forward regardless of whether one specific individual chooses to recognize it. And here is the part nobody talks about. When you genuinely start moving forward, when the energy shifts from waiting to building, something happens to the air around you. People notice, not just the person who stopped valuing you, everyone. Because there is a quality to someone who is actually living their life that is completely different from someone who is waiting for permission to live it. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You stop explaining yourself. And that difference is felt before it is ever seen. Drop this in the comments. Type, "My absence reveals the truth," because it does. And you deserve to know what that truth is. 3. Every time you explain yourself, you hand them the verdict. There is a moment in every relationship where the dynamic gets decided. It is not the big argument. It is not the dramatic confrontation. It is a quiet moment, usually early. A moment where you felt something was off, and instead of staying silent, you explained, you justified. You laid out your case for why you deserved to be treated better, and in that moment, without realizing it, you handed them something dangerous. You handed them the judge's hammer. Because the moment you begin explaining why you are worth something, you have already accepted a premise that should never have been on the table. The premise that your worth is a question that requires an answer, that it is open for debate, that they have the authority to evaluate your argument and return a verdict. They do not. Machiavelli was precise about this. He observed that authority does not justify itself. Authority announces. A prince who explains every decision to those beneath him has already revealed something critical. He revealed that he cares whether they agree. And the moment they know he cares, they have leverage. Think about that in your own life. Every time you say, "You do not understand how much I do for you." Every time you say, "I just want to be appreciated." Every time you write the long message that lays out exactly why you deserve more, you are asking for a verdict, and you are trusting the wrong judge. Here is what that looks like from the other side. When you explain yourself to someone who has pulled back, you are giving them a map of every place you feel insecure, every place where their opinion controls your state, every button that, if pressed correctly, will pull a reaction out of you. You think you are communicating. You are actually revealing your architecture, and the people who have stopped valuing you are not listening to understand. They are listening to locate. They are finding the pressure points, the inconsistencies, the emotional language that tells them exactly how much power they still have over you. Silence does not do that. Silence gives them nothing to locate, nothing to reframe, nothing to use against you. When you say nothing, they have to sit with their own assumptions, and those assumptions reveal more about them than anything you could say about yourself. Let them sit in that. Let them fill the silence with their own conclusions. You will learn more from what they project into your silence than from anything they ever said directly. Now I want to be careful here, because there is a difference between silence that comes from power and silence that comes from sulking. One is a choice. The other is still a reaction, just a quieter one. Sulking is still performing for their attention. It is still organized around them. Real silence is organized around you. Real silence is what happens when you genuinely stop needing them to understand. The philosopher Epictetus said something that connects here perfectly. He wrote that people are not disturbed by events, but by the opinions they hold about events. You are not in pain because they stopped valuing you. You are in pain because you need them to see it. You need their recognition to make your experience valid. But here is the harder truth. The recognition you are waiting for is not theirs to give. They already showed you who they are. Every day they did not reach out was information. Every time they took and did not return was data. Every moment you made yourself smaller and they let you, that was information too. The only verdict you are missing is your own. Stop waiting for them to confirm what you already know. There is something that happens when you finally stop explaining. Something unexpected. The energy you were spending on crafting the perfect message, finding the exact words that would make them finally understand, that energy returns to you, and it is yours to spend elsewhere. On something that actually grows when you pour into it. On someone who does not require a case to be made. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest mistake a leader can make is to wait for others to tell him what he can already see. That same principle applies here with devastating accuracy. The moment you are explaining your value to someone, you have waited too long. The decision should have already been made before that conversation started. Not the decision about them, the decision about yourself. The decision that your worth is not something you argue for. It is something you live from. And the difference between those two things is the difference between someone who is always trying to be seen and someone who simply is, clearly, visibly, undeniably, without needing anyone to confirm it. Once you start living from worth instead of arguing for it, the explaining stops. Not because you became cold, not because you stopped auditioning. And when you stop auditioning, you stop giving anyone in your life the position of casting director. 4. You are not in love with them, you are in love with the wound. I want you to think about something that might be uncomfortable. Have you ever met someone who was genuinely good to you? Stable, present, consistent. Someone who never made you question where you stood. And instead of feeling safe, you felt something else. Something closer to boredom. Something like this cannot be right. It feels too easy. And then somewhere else, there is the other person. The one who keeps you slightly off balance. The one you are never quite sure about. The one who makes you feel electric and anxious at the same time. And you call that chemistry. What if I told you that is not chemistry? What if I told you that is recognition? Sigmund Freud identified something he called the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the emotional conditions of our earliest experiences. Not because we enjoyed them, but because they are familiar. And familiar, to the nervous system, registers as safe, even when familiar is painful, even when familiar is destructive. The body knows this territory. It has a map. Unfamiliar peace reads as suspicious. Unfamiliar stability feels like a trap. Unfamiliar love that comes without conditions, without tension, without the constant threat of withdrawal, that feels dangerous, that feels fake. So what happens? You meet the stable person, and something in you pulls away. You find reasons to doubt them. You feel suffocated by their reliability. You tell yourself, there is no spark. And then, like a compass returning to north, you find yourself back near the person who gives you that familiar feeling. The feeling of having to work for love, of being slightly off balance, of never quite knowing where you stand. You mistake the anxiety for attraction. This is not a character flaw. This is programming, deep, early, invisible programming that runs underneath your conscious decisions. And until you see it clearly, you will keep meeting the same person in different faces. Different names, different details, same essential experience, same pattern, same outcome. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest danger is not the enemy you can see. It is the pattern you cannot recognize. He applied this to political power, but it applies with brutal precision to how we choose the people we love. The enemy is not the person who stopped valuing you. The enemy is the part of you that found them familiar in the first place, the part that was drawn to the uncertainty, the part that confused anxious attachment with passion. So let me ask you this directly. When you picture the relationship that hurt you most, what feeling did it give you at the beginning? Be honest. Was it peace, or was it something more intense? A kind of intoxicating uncertainty, a pull you could not quite explain, a feeling of being alive in a way that easier relationships never quite matched. That feeling has a name, and the name is not love. The name is activation, the activation of an old wound that never fully closed. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You will call it bad luck. You will call it always ending up with the wrong person. But it is not fate. It is a loop that replays until you stop it. And you stop it not by finding the right person. You stop it by becoming honest about why the wrong ones keep feeling right. Here is what that actually looks like beneath the surface. The person who made you feel electric was activating your nervous system, not your heart, your nervous system. The part that learned long before you had words for any of this, that love comes with conditions. That affection has to be earned. That connection can be withdrawn at any moment if you do not perform correctly. So when someone recreates that environment as an adult, your system lights up because it knows this game. It has played it before. It has a script ready. The problem is you are running a childhood script with adult stakes. So what do you do with this? You start noticing, not judging, just noticing. When you feel that electric pull towards someone who keeps you uncertain, pause. Ask yourself, is this attraction or is this activation? Is this chemistry or is this a familiar wound calling out to a familiar pattern? You will not always be able to answer that in the moment. The feeling is strong, the pull is real. But the act of asking creates a small gap between the sensation and your next decision. And that gap is everything. That gap is where your power lives. That gap is where the old loop can finally be interrupted. Do not rush past that question. Stay in it. Let it be uncomfortable. Because the discomfort of the question is nothing compared to the cost of ignoring it for another year, another relationship, another version of the same ending. Machiavelli understood that the ruler who cannot recognize his own patterns is always the most vulnerable person in any room, not because others are more clever, but because they can see what he cannot. You cannot defend a blind spot. You cannot protect what you refuse to name. Name the pattern, right now. Not out loud if you do not want to, but inside, in the honest part of yourself that already knows exactly what we are talking about. You know what the pattern is. Drop this in the comments. Type, I choose peace over familiar pain. Because that choice starts with naming what you have been calling love and seeing it for what it actually is. 5. A boundary without consequence is just a wish. Let me tell you exactly how someone stops valuing you. It does not happen overnight. There is no single moment where they made a conscious decision that you were worth less. It happened in increments, small moments, quiet moments, moments where a line was crossed and you let it pass, and then another moment, and another. The first cancelled plan that went unaddressed. The first dismissive comment you swallowed. The first time they took more than they gave and you told yourself it would balance out. In each of those moments, a message was transmitted and received, not in words, in experience. There are no consequences here. I can take without losing. I can be careless without cost. That is not cruelty. That is human psychology operating exactly as it was designed. People expand into the space they are given. They take up as much room as remains unchallenged. Not because they are evil, because that is what all of us do when there is no resistance. We do not even notice we are doing it. You taught them how to treat you, not intentionally, but clearly, every time. Machiavelli wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. They do not hear what you say you believe about yourself, they observe what you tolerate. And what you tolerate becomes the operating definition of your standard. Not the standard you claim when you are angry, the standard you demonstrate day after day in your actual choices. This is the distinction most people never make, and it costs them everything. There are 3 levels of what people call boundaries. The first is a preference. You say you do not want something, but when it happens, nothing changes. You absorb it. You bring it up again later in a different context. The preference gets crossed every time, because crossing it carries no weight, no consequence, no shift in access. The second is a stated boundary. You say clearly what you will not accept, and sometimes you hold it. Sometimes you do not. The inconsistency communicates something more damaging than having no boundary at all. It communicates that your limits are negotiable under the right conditions, and now they know exactly how much pressure to apply, how long to wait, how sorry to sound. The third is a standard, and a standard operates differently from both of those. A standard does not need to be announced. It does not need to be explained or defended or repeated in a louder voice. It exists entirely in your behavior, in how you respond, in what you walk away from without a speech, without a dramatic exit, without needing them to understand why. A standard is demonstrated, not declared. Machiavelli was ruthless about this. He understood that a leader who threatens without acting loses more authority from the empty threat than from whatever originally challenged him, because now they know the ceiling. Now they know the limit is not real, and they will press right up against it every single time, knowing nothing will happen. Every time you said this is not okay, and then stayed anyway, you set the ceiling a little higher. Now here is what makes this genuinely difficult, and I want to acknowledge this because most people skip past it. Enforcing real standards is not about anger. Anger is still a reaction. It is still organized around them. It still requires them to witness it, to feel complete. Real standards do not need an audience. They are quiet decisions you make about your own life, held without announcement, without drama, without the final speech that proves how much they hurt you. You do not tell someone you are done. You are done, and your behavior simply reflects that, without explanation. Without the door left open just enough that they might come back if they say the right thing. That is when something real shifts. Not always in them, always in you. Because the moment you stop tolerating what diminishes you, not as a move, not as leverage, but as a genuine act of choosing yourself, your nervous system starts receiving a new message. A message it may not have received in a long time. The message that says, I do not stay where I am not valued, not as a threat to someone else, as a fact about myself. And facts carry a weight that threats never will. There is one more thing here that almost no one talks about honestly. Forgiveness does not require continued presence. You can genuinely release the bitterness and still close the door. You can wish someone well from a distance that protects you. These two things are not contradictions. Mercy and boundaries can exist in the same person at the same time. What they cannot do is function in the same space. You can forgive and still leave. You can hold no anger and still hold the door shut. Machiavelli would frame it plainly. Mercy without structure is not mercy. It is simply the absence of consequence given a softer name. And the people who benefit from your endless mercy while offering nothing in return, are not experiencing your love. They are experiencing your fear of what happens if you stop. You are not hard-hearted for holding your standard. You are not cold for requiring people to earn your continued presence. You are not difficult for refusing to participate in your own diminishment. You are simply doing, finally, what you should have done at that first quiet moment, the one where the line was crossed, and you let it go because you told yourself it was small. It was not small. None of them were small. They were the building of a pattern, and today is the day that pattern ends. 6. They did not change. You just saw all of them. People always ask the same question. Why is he not the same as he was at the beginning? Why is she not as attentive as she used to be? What happened to the person I fell for? I am going to tell you what happened, and it will be uncomfortable. Nothing happened. They are exactly who they were. You are just seeing the complete version now. Because the beginning of any relationship is not the real person. It is a performance, not necessarily a dishonest one, but a performance nonetheless. In the early stages, you were unknown to them. You were a challenge, an unresolved question. And the human brain, operating exactly as it evolved to operate, invested heavily in solving that question. They called more. They showed up more. They were more attentive, more present, more everything. Not because they were better then, because you had not yet been filed under guaranteed. The moment you became certain, the pursuit stopped. Machiavelli observed this dynamic with precision. A ruler who fought hard for a territory valued it deeply. A ruler who inherited the same territory often neglected it entirely. Not because one was more capable than the other, but because effort creates investment, and investment creates value. What requires no effort requires no maintenance. What was never earned is never truly protected. You stopped requiring effort, and so you stopped being protected. Now, before you make this entirely about them, here is the other side of that truth. You were not seeing them clearly in the beginning either. You were seeing them through the filter of your own pursuit. High dopamine, the chemical your brain releases during anticipation and chase, does something very specific to your perception. It narrows your focus. It amplifies the signals you want to see. It creates a kind of selective blindness that feels like clarity, but is actually the opposite. The signs were there. Looking back, they were always there. The small moments of carelessness, the times they put themselves first without registering the impact on you. The patterns that, in retrospect, were never really hidden. They were just invisible to you because you were in a state that was not designed for accurate perception. You were designed, in that moment, for pursuit. You were not naive. You were operating on chemistry that was never meant to produce clear judgment. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The early version of someone is always the appearance. Time, comfort, and guaranteed access are what finally reveal who they actually are. The version that shows up after the chase is over. The version that exists when there is nothing left to win. This is not cynicism. This is the most useful thing you can understand about how people work. Because if you go back into something, or when you meet someone new, you need to know how to see past the opening performance. Not with suspicion, not with walls that prevent anything real from developing, with precision. The kind of precision that comes from knowing what you are looking for. Watch what people do when things get inconvenient. Watch how they treat you when you are not at your best. Watch what they prioritize when priorities conflict, and no one is watching to see if they make the right call. Watch who they are on an ordinary Tuesday, when there is no reason to impress you and no consequence for being careless. That is who they are. And here is a question I want you to sit with honestly. If you had seen this version of them from the very beginning, would you have invested the same way? Take your time with that, because your answer to that question tells you something important about what you are actually choosing and why. The reason that question matters is not to produce regret. Regret serves nothing and costs everything. The reason it matters is to illuminate what information you were filtering out, and more importantly, why you were filtering it. Because whatever you were unable to see then, you will be unable to see again with the next person, until something changes in how you look, not just who you look at. Machiavelli was clear on this point. The leader who cannot read people accurately will always be shaped by them, rather than shaping the situation himself. Not because the people around him are exceptional liars, but because he is an exceptional hopeful. He sees what he needs to see. He believes what feels good to believe. And that hope, unexamined, becomes the most reliable vulnerability anyone around him can use. Hope is not the problem. Unexamined hope is. See them fully. The complete version. The pattern over time. The choices they made when it cost them something real to choose differently. That is the actual person. And the actual person is the one you have to decide about. Not the version from the beginning. Not the performance. The full picture. Drop this in the comments. Write, "I see clearly now." Because that is what this is. Not a loss. A correction of vision. And a correction of vision, as painful as it is to make, is always better than staying blind. 7. The one thing. And why almost nobody actually does it. So here we are. You understand that constant availability destroys value. You understand that real absence is not a game but a revelation. You understand that explanation hands others the verdict on your worth. You understand the pattern that keeps pulling you toward familiar pain. You understand that your standards must live in your behavior, not in your words. You understand that the person you fell for was a performance, and the real person was always underneath it, waiting to be seen clearly. You understand all of it. And still, the one thing, the actual one thing that changes everything. Here it is. Stop making them the center, not as a tactic, not as a 3-day experiment to measure the reaction, not as a calculated move designed to manufacture an outcome. Stop, actually, making them the center. This sounds simple. It is the hardest thing most people will ever attempt, because when someone has occupied the center of your mental and emotional life, removing them from that position does not feel like freedom. It feels like amputation. It feels like removing the organizing principle of your entire day. And in a way, that is exactly what it is. Your first instinct will be to fill the space immediately. Distractions, new situations, constant activity designed to avoid feeling the size of what you just created. Resist that instinct. Sit in the space. Because inside that space, underneath the discomfort, underneath the silence, is something you have not visited in a long time. You, the version of you that existed before this relationship started reshaping you. Before you began organizing your days around someone else's rhythms, without realizing you were doing it. Before you checked your phone, before you checked in with yourself, before you calibrated your entire emotional state to their mood, before you even knew what your own mood was. That person is still there. They did not disappear. They got quiet. And now, for the first time in a while, you have the space to hear them again. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler who cannot stand alone will always be dependent on those who are standing. Dependence, in his framework, is the single greatest vulnerability a person can carry, because dependence gives someone else the ability to determine your stability simply by choosing to withdraw. And right now you have built a dependence that is costing you more than you have been willing to name out loud. So what does redirecting actually look like in practice? It means going back to the interests you quietly dropped. Not because they make you more attractive, not because someone might notice, because they are yours. They were always yours. And at some point, you started editing yourself to fit into a space someone else defined for you. And those interests got left outside the frame. Pick them back up. It means pursuing the ambitions you put on hold, the direction you kept meaning to move toward, the version of your life you kept telling yourself you would get to once things settled. Things do not settle by waiting. They settle by building. And you have been waiting long enough. It means spending real time with the people who have been consistently, quietly showing up for you. The ones who never required you to chase them. The connections that were never complicated or conditional. The relationships where you never once had to wonder if you were too much. Those people exist in your life. You have been mostly absent from them because your attention was somewhere else. Go back. It means sitting with your own thoughts long enough to hear them clearly again, without the noise of analyzing every text, without the loop of replaying conversations looking for clues about where you stand, without the exhausting mental labor of trying to predict, manage, or influence what one specific person is feeling about you on any given day. That silence, your own mental silence, is not emptiness. It is where your real self has been waiting. And here is what happens to the energy around you when you genuinely make this shift. You become different, not in a performed way, not in the way you can fake for a few weeks before it collapses back into old patterns. Different in a real, settled, quiet way that people feel before they can name it. There is a quality to someone who is actually building their own life that is impossible to manufacture and impossible to ignore. It is not confidence as a posture. It is confidence as a consequence. The natural consequence of knowing who you are and where you are headed, independent of whether anyone else is watching or approving. Machiavelli observed that the person who is most difficult to manipulate is not the hardest or the most aggressive. It is the one who least needs anything from the people around them. Neediness is the vulnerability. Genuine investment in your own direction is the protection. Now, both outcomes. If the person who stopped valuing you genuinely cared, they will feel this shift. Not the performance of it, the real thing. And they may respond. They may reach out. They may show you something that was always in them but required your changed energy to come forward. If they do, watch the behavior over time, not the words. The consistent behavior across weeks and months when the novelty has settled. That is your answer. And if they do not come back, they have given you something more valuable than their return. They have given you clarity. The complete, unambiguous clarity that removes every last piece of false hope and every reason to stay in the loop. They cleared the space. And in that space, something will grow. Not immediately, not without discomfort, but inevitably. Something that belongs entirely to you. Something built on your terms. Something that does not ask you to be smaller to fit inside it. The question was never whether they would come back. The question was always who you would become while you were finding out. That becoming. That is the one thing. The silence, the absence, the boundary, the pattern recognition, all of it leads here. To a life lived from the inside out, directed by your own values, built on your own terms, not organized around someone else's decision about your worth. That is the move Machiavelli would make. Not because it is clever, because it is the only position from which real power, real connection, and a real life are even possible. You came into this video like that person typing the same message 9 times. You are leaving it as someone different, not because you have a new strategy, because you have a clearer view of the pattern, of the programming, of the exact moments where you handed your power to someone who had no idea what to do with it. And more importantly, you now understand why you handed it, not out of weakness, out of a very human need that was never properly answered somewhere earlier in your life. That understanding changes everything, because you cannot break a pattern you refuse to see, and you have been seeing it clearly this entire time. Here is the final thing I want you to take with you. Your value did not decrease because someone failed to see it. A painting does not become worthless because someone walked past it without stopping. The work is still there. The quality is still there. What changed is only where it was hanging. Stop hanging yourself in the wrong rooms. Stop performing your worth for audiences that never intended to recognize it. Stop explaining yourself to people who are not asking because they want to understand. Stop waiting. Stop shrinking. Stop organizing your life around the question of what they are thinking. Start building. Start returning. Start directing your energy toward the one investment that compounds, that grows, that never once requires you to prove yourself before receiving a return. Yourself. Machiavelli understood that the most untouchable person in any dynamic is not the one who fights hardest. It is the one who needs least. The one who has built something real that does not depend on any single person to remain standing. The one who walks into any room, any conversation, any relationship already whole. Build that. Drop this final affirmation in the comments right now. Write, "My value does not require their validation." Mean it, because it is true whether they ever see it or not. It was always true. If this reached something real in you, share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Like this video so it finds the people who are still typing and deleting that 9th message. And subscribe, because what comes next goes even deeper.